I'm willing to say he's the basement coach of the year.
Two games, they're gonna get something rolling.
This is the Sports Saga podcast, and it is presented by Al Dias Electric. Hi, everyone, and thank you. Oh, by the way, we have a new sponsor. We want to welcome aboard the Gonzalez family team of Keller Williams, South Watuppa. Shout out to them. Thank you for coming aboard, Chad and the girls over there. Brady Kudo, Tyler Sumner, and a very special guest, a man who has done it all. He's seen it all in the sports broadcasting world. Well, from where we are, you might know him for a while as the voice of the Boston Red Sox. Jerry Trupiano is with us today. Jerry, thank you for taking the time. Most importantly, how are you?
I'm getting by. How you guys doing? You got sponsors. I'm impressed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's good to have friends.
It sure is.
All right, so I will get it started. I'll dive right into it. You're a St. Louis guy, so take me maybe through the journey of how you've been all over, right? You've seen it and everything, but maybe compare the St. Louis fan base and their passion for sports as to here in Boston.
Well, St. Louis is a great baseball town, and it's a very, very good hockey town. They used to have the NBA with the St. Louis Hawks, and when the Blues came around with the first expansion of the National Hockey League, that sort of dented the Hawks. So the Blues became the hit of the town, and because the way it was structured back in those days, the Blues in the new 6-team division, which was the 6 expansion teams, whoever won that division was going to go to the Stanley Cup Finals. They did against Montreal. They did the first 3 years. The first 2 years against Montreal, then of course the third year against Bobby Orr and the Bruins. The great picture of Orr scoring in overtime, flying through the air, being tripped up by Noel Picard. So they caught fire early on. The football Cardinals left in a dispute over a stadium. Then they went to Arizona. Then they got the Rams, who won the Super Bowl there, and eventually lost to the Patriots the next time they went to the Super Bowl. And then again, after building them a new facility, the owner Kroenke wanted an upgrade or another facility, and he said, well, he had land in Los Angeles, and he built that great mega stadium that they have there now. And he wanted out of there, and that's created hard feelings. So that's a long way of telling you that St. Louis is a baseball town and a hockey town. And I think if they had a winning football team, or if football ever comes back, I think they'd be okay with it again to do well. But the Boston fans are so passionate. Red Sox, Bruins, Patriots, Celtics, winning traditions here. I guess the really the fair comparison would be hockey and baseball. I think they're both very, very passionate.
So, Jerry, my first question for you is, what made you decide that the broadcasting business was for you, and why you wanted to get into this business?
I was playing wiffle ball at our home at 5673 Hillard Place in St. Louis. I hit a home run against a buddy of mine into Mrs. Bussey's yard, the next door neighbor. And I called it as it was going out, as Harry Carey would call it. And it impressed the guys I was with. And, when you get a good reaction like that, I fell in love with the game of baseball. And we were so lucky in St. Louis growing up to have 3 Hall of Fame broadcasters doing the Cardinals while I was growing up. Harry Carey, Jack Buck, and Joe Garagiola, all in the broadcast wing of the Baseball Hall of Fame. And as time evolved, I didn't know about Syracuse. I didn't know Syracuse University. I didn't know about Ohio University or USC or other schools that had broadcast programs. All I knew was about their football teams and their basketball teams. But I knew found out St. Louis University in my hometown had a campus radio station. So I went to St. Louis University, got in. Campus radio station, as it turns out, was on the 3rd floor of a condemned building. One afternoon, this is back in the dark ages before the internet, they were calling looking for the station manager, a guy named Roger Downey, a senior, who was the next door neighbor of Robert Hyland, the general manager at KMOX, a legend in the broadcast industry, started talk radio. And 3 times turned down the presidency of CBS Radio to stay in St. Louis. He loved St. Louis and the Cardinals that much.
Wow.
So they were looking for Roger to have him take a job relaying scores to the out-of-town football broadcasters when the football Cardinal broadcasters and the University of Missouri broadcasters were not in their home booths. Not every facility had the Western Union ticker tape to get the scores, so they needed somebody at the newsroom at KMOX Radio. Before there was an ESPN, there was KMOX. This radio station heard in 42 of the 50 states. You could hear it all over, and they had Cardinal baseball, Hawks basketball, Blues hockey, University of Missouri football and basketball, the football Cardinals. So I was the only one at the station, and they needed to fill the job that day for some reason. And they asked me if I knew anything about football. I said, yeah, I know about football. They brought me in. I got the job. Football season was over. They let me go. There was no other opening. A month later, they called me. They needed a producer. They hired me back. There I met Harry Carey and Jack Buck. And Jack was the one who took a liking to me, would get me into a empty booth at Busch Stadium to practice baseball play-by-play on a 20-pound Voice of Music tape recorder, reel-to-reel tape recorder. If you go to my website, thesportsmind.com, there's a picture of me. My mother found this in the St. Louis Post-Dispatch in the newspaper. Cardinals had a pitcher by the name of Scipio Spinks. Back in the day when pitchers would hit, he's on second base, a game against Cincinnati Reds. Base hit, center field. He comes around to score. He decides he's going to run over Johnny Bench. Scipio turned out to be a great baseball scout, but poor judgment trying to run into Johnny Bench. He broke his leg. So the picture in the Post-Dispatch was Scipio in the press box with his crutches watching the game, and over 2 booths over is this kid with long sideburns and a microphone fashioned out of a broken desk lamp going into a tape recorder, and it's me practicing, and Jack would listen to the tapes, critique them. Then he would get me into a booth with people in it at the football Cardinal games to practice my football play-by-play. And then Dan Kelly, the best hockey announcer who's ever lived, would get me into the press box. There was no broadcast booth at the old St. Louis Arena, and I would practice doing hockey there. So that's a long way to tell you how I got started, and that eventually led to an on-air job doing hockey in Houston, into a talk show, into being a sports director, the NFL, the NBA, University of Texas, University of Houston, Rice University, network stuff, CBS, Fox, the World Football League in Canada is the -- voice there. So we bounced around a little bit, but it all started at that campus radio station.
Would you say have or had a favorite sport to call?
Baseball. I like them all. Baseball. Not doing baseball right now, like somebody cut off my right arm. I miss it every day. It's the toughest to do. It's the hardest to do. And people say, why? I mean, it's the dead time. It's not so much calling the action. It's filling the dead spaces and doing it while you let the game breathe, and to be entertaining and to be informative and to get the score in as often as it should. It's the hardest to do. Football, basketball, hockey, all controlled by a clock. And there are teams who put their offenses together based on that clock. Back when I was doing the Houston Oilers, games against the Cincinnati Bengals and the Buffalo Bills, both teams would go with no huddle. So your analyst would have not as much time to speak. And you maybe not have enough time to set up the offense. Hill left, Gibbons right, Smith tight on the right, backs offset left. You might have to cut all that down because of what's happening there. Hockey, if it's a team like when I was doing the WHA, the Quebec Nordiques, and Bobby Helen, the Winnipeg Jets, they were flying all over. You would have to be on the puck and not give your analyst a lot of time to speak. And in basketball, the University of Texas was run and gun, as opposed to somebody like in the NBA, the Rockets setting up a half-court offense, if you will. So you adjust along the way, but baseball is the toughest, and that's my favorite.
So, Jerry, you brought up the Houston Rockets. So you broadcasted for the Rockets. What was that experience like for you, and how did it help your career in broadcasting?
Well, let's see. It was really the first established team that I joined. When I got into the business, it was on the air. When I got on the air, the first job was the Houston Aeros of the World Hockey Association, a rival of the NHL. But they had Gordie Howe and his two sons, which was a major story around the country. The first time a father and his sons played together on a professional team. But the Rockets, an NBA franchise, had been established, and that was the first time I was with an established organization, if you will. It's funny. I've done a lot of things. I audition, and I'm terrible at auditions. Terrible. I've done Major League Baseball for over 20 years. I've auditioned, several times, but I just don't audition well. But the games, when they had the top 50 calls of Major League Baseball selected by the MLB Network, they selected one of my calls as number 25. And you're on a list with Vince Scully, Jack Buck, and Ernie Harwell, and all these great broadcasters. Yeah. I'm not putting myself in that category, but you're on that list. But auditioning, I can't do it. My Rockets audition lasted 3 minutes. I had never done a basketball game in my life. They had, I did the TV for the Rockets, and they put me in the studio with a monitor, and they put up a game tape, and I started. 3 minutes in, they say, you got the job. It's crazy how this business works sometimes.
Yeah, it is.
Now, I think we found the picture.
Oh, yeah.
Is that it?
I can't see. I've got something in the middle.
Oh, wait, hold on. There we go. Is that it?
Well, I see it in the background, but I have the meeting being recorded sign from Zoom in the way here. Okay, but that's the picture.
Now?
Yeah. No, it's still there. Yeah, off in the distance there with the long sideburns.
Okay.
Yours truly. You can't. I don't know. You can probably see a briefcase opened up there, but there's a 20-pound voice music tape recorder there, and yeah, good old Scipio Spinks. That injury, by the way, pretty much curtailed his career. He was never the same after that. But he became a very, very good major league scout.
Speaking of major leagues, I want to dive into Boston, and I want to dive into the Red Sox. So you joined the Red Sox booth in the 90s, worked with the great Joe Castiglione. And I want to know, I'm going to focus in on one moment, and I want to focus in on the 04 World Series at Busch Stadium.
Mm-hmm.
Ironic how it all circles back.
Yeah.
So take me through what was going through your mind when you're about to realize that the team you're calling is going to beat your hometown team in the biggest sporting event of the year.
It was surreal for me because you saw that picture. All right.
Yeah.
Now let me explain to you what happens in the postseason in Major League Baseball. When your local TV is gone in the postseason, you don't do local TV, so they assign booths. Okay. In each ballpark, the number one TV booth goes to Fox. Okay. So at Fenway, the home booth went to Fox. Visiting TV goes in 2004, it was ESPN International. Now it's the MLB Network. Home radio, whichever park you're in, home radio stays in the home park, in your home booth. Visiting radio booth goes to ESPN Radio, and the visiting team has to go to an auxiliary booth. All right, you follow me so far?
Got it.
So now we get to St. Louis. I'm not in the visiting radio booth. I go to an auxiliary booth, the booth I used to practice in as a kid. That same booth I did the 2004 World Series in. You talk about full circle. And I just wish Jack Buck was alive. He had died in 2002. That's another story. How I found out about that. Yeah. So I just wish Jack had been alive to see that. But and Jack always used to give me when I was in the National League in those days with the Astros and the Expos, especially the Expos in 1989. They were making a run at the division until they ran into Greg Maddux and the Cubs in September, and things fell apart. And Jack was kidding me all season long. He said, "You're finally got to get your ring. You're finally got to get your ring." But I know when you do a game against the Cardinals, you want the Cardinals to win. I said, "No, Jack, I want that ring. I want that ring." And he was good natured, really kidding me because as a professional, you're not going to worry about your hometown team or whatever. But I wish he had been alive to see that 2004. One of my treasured things is an autographed copy of his autobiography, which his inscription was, "I always knew you would make it." It meant a lot to me.
So, Jerry, you've always been a big baseball broadcaster. So, obviously, this year we lost the great Vin Scully. What kind of impact did he have on your career?
When I was first starting out in this business with the Astros, the first time I went to Vero Beach to play the Dodgers. They were training back in Vero Beach back then. And I had met through Jack and through Harry because I was always hanging around. If I wasn't practicing, if I couldn't have a booth available, I'd go over to the ballpark and hang around and bug those guys. And I met a lot of broadcasters, but I never got to meet Vin Scully. So now I'm with the Astros. They're playing an exhibition game at Vero Beach against the Dodgers. And before the game, you go over to the dining area and you have a little bite to eat. So I'm coming out as Vin Scully is coming up, and I'm a little bit nervous. Back in those days, you're in awe of people as you first meet them. So I'm a little bit nervous. I'm an introvert in an extrovert's business. I'm very shy. I think I've changed from what I hear. So I go up to introduce myself. As I'm walking down these steps to approach him, before I get a word out, he goes, "Jerry, I'm Vin Scully." He knew my name. He knew about me before I introduced myself. And he was the best. As great as he was, and the same thing about Jack Buck. The two best, I think, who have ever broadcast baseball. And I know I'm prejudiced about that. But they are good people. They were good people. They kept their humility, they kept their dignity, and they treated people the way you wanted to be treated.
Absolutely.
And I think that says a lot. Believe me, I have worked with people. I probably still have the knife marks in my back. This could be a nasty business. And there are a lot of egos. Some hide it very well. Others don't try to hide it at all. But to come across unique people like Vin and Jack, and now two of my best friends I talk to all the time, Joe Buck, Jack's son, and Jim Nance, still, those guys are cut from the same cloth. They're as honest, they're as sincere. The person you hear on the air or see on the air are the same people in real life. It's not that way with everybody, believe me.
So I know Joe gets a lot of heat, but I will say the book, I don't read a lot, but when I do read, I like to read autobiographies. It's a great read.
Yeah.
And I'm learning, like, he gets way too much heat.
Yeah. I've got an interview for him. I'm going to play in my classes at Dean and the University of Houston. And he breaks down the art of play-by-play, the interaction between the play-by-play man, I guess it to be politically correct, the play-by-play person and the analyst, as well as it's one of the best things I've ever heard. Yeah, he takes a lot of heat, which is unfair. People say, well, he got the job because of his dad's name. His dad's name opened the door. His mother actually sent the tape, unbeknownst to Jack, unbeknownst to Joe, to Fox.
Really?
Yeah. And Jack knew nothing about it. And that got him in the door, okay, because she knew the wife of the head of Fox Sports. And the wife turns it over to the husband and says, okay, this guy's pretty good. So that opened the door. but his talent carried him all those years.
Oh yeah,
You don't do 20 some World Series and 7 Super Bowls based on somebody's name. You got to be pretty doggone good to
Yeah.
stay in that realm.
absolutely.
And my last question for you, Jerry, is so you called 04 and I was just a baby by then. Brady was not born yet.
You're killing me.
What was it like witnessing now Hall of Famer David Ortiz be so clutch in that postseason?
You know what? That's the call that got me number 25 on that list. The home run to beat the Yankees in Game 4 of the American League Championship Series. Then he got the base hit the next night in Game 5 in extra innings to win Game 5. On that website I told you about, there are four different highlights of the heroics of David Ortiz. And Bill James, who is this guru who writes all the books about the different stats and what they mean and breaking it down, all these analytics, he said there's no such thing that as far as being a clutch hitter. Well, I give you Exhibit A is David Ortiz. But you know, you get me off on a tangent on analytics. But Ortiz turned his career into a Hall of Fame career. And a lot of credit should go to Pedro Martinez and Manny Ramirez.
Absolutely.
Oh yeah,
Who put the bug in people's ears, and Dave Jouse, who was managing over in the Dominican, who was a Red Sox coach at one time. The bug went into the ears of the people at Fenway. And remember for all the geniuses in the world out there who take credit for David Ortiz, he was on the bench for the month of April, and the late Giambi, Jason Giambi's brother, who's with the Red Sox, was the designated hitter and struggled. David Ortiz gets into a game against the Angels in Anaheim, hits an opposite field extra inning home run in the 14th inning to help win a game. Then Terry Francona puts him in the lineup, and he had wanted to put him in the lineup earlier than that, but the baseball brain trust over there said, no, we got this Giambi guy, and he's an on-base machine, and the rest is history.
So I want to, like, I'm recognizing your career and its excellence, but I want to move to now your current chapter at Dean College, Tyler smirking, and the University of Houston. So you've been on the mic for years, but now you're in the classroom. What's that change been like?
It's been fun. It's hopefully giving back of some what I learned. Listen, at KMOX, which I mentioned earlier, Jack Buck and Dan Kelly were the two guys I was closest with. But being exposed to Jack, Dan, Harry Carey, Bob Starr, the best football broadcaster I ever heard, to me it was like the equivalent of getting a PhD in play-by-play from Harvard. Listening, talking, picking the brains of those guys, and for Jack and Dan to have the courtesy, if you will, to listen to my tapes that I put together. And then I worked 4 years at KMOX. In those 4 years, twice in my 4 years, Jack and Dan were in the building at the same time. The second time was the day the Houston Aeros had called. And I put those two guys down as references. Was the day that Houston called to get their opinion, as I had put them down as references. And the only time Jack really got upset with me, I'm standing outside the office when I hear it's Houston calling, and I'm standing outside the office and I'm kind of listening. And Jack said, "Man, you should have left. You should have left totally." But when people are those guys who you look up to and you want to kind of fit into their shoes at some point in your career, for them to be saying nice things about you, it was mesmerizing.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us on the Sports Saga podcast. Of course, we want to thank Jerry Trupiano for joining us as well today. Jerry, it's been a pleasure. And this episode is also brought to you by Al Dias Electric and Smack
You got it
Apparel,
right.
folks. If you're looking for sports gear or college gear, go to smackapparel.com. They got all your needs. Use code SAGA, that's SAGA, at checkout for 10% off your first order. Jerry, thank you for
Not
joining
just
us.
your first order, every order, Sumner.
All right, my pleasure. Good luck, guys.
Thank you so
Thank
much
you.
again.